Thank you for joining. Good morning. Great to be here at the Deliver conference, fittingly at the yellow part of this room. So I think that's not a coincidence. This year we are exclusively launching here at the conference our fourth online shopper survey, and excited to share and discuss the findings together with a great panel. First of all with Dana von der Heide, the founder and CCO of Parcel Perform. Then with Sam Jarvis, the founder and CEO of HubBox, and my esteemed colleague Ryan, the Chief Commercial Officer of DHL Ecommerce. I'm actually quite looking forward to this. I think we had a lot of things to discuss already, so let's get right into it. So for this year's survey, we have again asked thousands of consumers about their preferences. And we stepped up the report again as well. So we have an increased reach, and we also introduced, looking at the data from different lenses, from different generations, or as well as different archetypes, as you can see here. And the result of that is a massively big and interesting database that you have access to, so it's all public. And for today, we selected 7 interesting findings to trigger the discussion, which we will have in about 10-15 minutes. So let's get right into it. Bear with me, and we start with the first finding and topic. So the first topic is about cart abandonment, something we've been discussing here a lot before, and it remains a big topic because 81% of shoppers abandon their basket if they cannot find their preferred delivery option. So it just again highlights the importance of, bringing from a carrier perspective a reliable, affordable, and sustainable service. And really, the carrier in this case is often the only physical touch point in this whole transaction. And that remains a very important topic, specifically if you are targeting baby boomers in your shop. The second big topic is cross-border. Cross-border is growing, keeps on growing, and also seen here in the study. 59% of the consumers we've asked have mentioned that they shopped from other countries. Probably a lot more also have shopped from other countries without knowing it. But this is the answer they gave. And that's actually another 4 percentage points up than the last time we've asked. So that's a significant growth potential still there in our eyes. And it's interesting, one of the interesting findings here is that trust is always an important element. Typically, many buy knowingly from China, the US, Germany, the UK. But 7 in 10 global online shoppers said they will only buy from countries they trust, which I think is a pretty interesting angle to it. And I think something we can maybe discuss later in the debate. Out of home and returns, big topic, of course. I think now in the 4th row of the survey, the rise of out of home is super visible. Again, there's a big increase of consumer preference towards out of home delivery. Actually, 35% of all the European consumers we've asked already prefer a parcel locker or parcel shop delivery. And that's continued to increase and increase. So I think out of home is clearly on the rise and a little bit unstoppable. And on the return side as well, 79% of the European consumers prefer a drop of the returns in out of home related networks like parcel lockers and parcel shops. So a lot more to come here. We also asked this time for about social shopping. And so 7 out of 10 global shoppers have already made purchases via social media. And the interesting thing is that many of them expect it to be their number one shopping experience or shopping entry point by 2030. So it will be really interesting to see what this does to the regular website. Yeah, so where many of us started, we had this discussion earlier, and also what AI commerce will do to this topic. Subscriptions. is a little bit of a pet topic for me. Again, I think we have an interesting debate about that later. Why do I personally think it's a good business model? Because on the product side in general, because it gives stable revenue for the merchant, it gives plannable supply chain and procurement, and it also gives a stable last mile planning. So in general, from a supply chain management perspective, subscriptions are awesome. Actually, 34% of shoppers mentioned that they already have an online shopping subscription on the product side. Here with Gen Z and social shoppers actually leading the pack. So I think that's an indication that this will increase. And what's also interesting, we've also asked merchants, going back on the right side. So we asked merchants, do you also offer any form of delivery type of subscriptions? And the answer was that 14% of merchants are already offering some form of subscription to buffer a little bit the free delivery cost and returns cost. So I think this whole thing will be an interesting discussion later, but it looks like the topic is gaining some momentum and increasing. We, for the first time, asked the consumers about Black Friday. And although there's some criticism on it, most consumers seem to be looking forward to Black Friday and actively planning to buy more there, same or more than in the last years, with Gen Z and the millennials leading the pack. So millennials, 81% mentioned that they will buy more or the same or even more. So looks like Black Friday is going to happen again and keeps the momentum for sure. And the last one to trigger the discussion is around sustainability. So I think sustainability we've also been discussing here also in our surveys in the past. And it continues to be of importance. Yeah, so it is there. It's increasing. The younger target group, gets in front of it and demands it. That itself might not be the biggest finding, but I think it's interesting to see that sustainability seems to be more and more understood also as sustainability of the product, reliability of the merchant. So it gets a bit broader type of view beyond CO2, I think, and something to be discussed, I guess, in the panel going forward. And as you can see here also in some of the stats, everything around recycling, reuse, or refurbishment is mainstream by now, right? So it's not something that is still. I'm sure it will still grow. We will see when we have more of these stats in the next years that this will increase, but it is mainstream. But many do it in many areas, more than 50% are actively purchasing refurbished products or sustainability scored products and so on. So I think that topic is clearly arrived in the center of everything. So just to kick off a good discussion around a few things, and so I'll keep those a little bit to guide the discussion. And I guess, Ryan, there's a lot to talk to about. So hand over to you to moderate us through the session.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Really good to see such a full audience. That's fantastic for the second day of a conference after a big night. Maybe just an engagement check to see who's tracking with us. Anybody learn anything from the statistics that my buddy Alex just presented, maybe by a show of hands? Anybody learn anything? A few people? Okay, so maybe some reinforcement of what was already known, which is interesting because I think Sam and I were talking a little bit about that earlier, right? So maybe Sam, you could kick us off and give us your impressions and, anything in there that was interesting or surprising, or was it kind of all status quo for you?
Yeah, nothing jumps out particularly surprising to me in respect to the data that you found in recent surveys. I think when you look at some of this data, and if we come to think about from the sustainability perspective, what people say in a survey is quite different to how they behave. And what we've seen when we track the performance or the behavior around sustainability is very different in that specific regard. And so I think nothing massively surprising there, but also I'm always a little bit wary about what's the delta between what you say and what you do. It's a bit like if you ask a customer, do you want free, cheap, and fast delivery? Everyone's going to say yes, right? If you say, do you want out of home? People are probably going to say yes, but do they actually use it? And we've got to try and work out what's the actual reality to those things along the side they say. So look, lots of great stuff, but I think it'd be great to get into some of these things about, do we actually agree that we're seeing those behaviors as well as in the way that you just presented them?
Great insights, man. Dana, what do you think? Any first impressions of the survey?
Yeah, also similar. I think there's a lot of stuff that gets confirmed that we already knew, but there's also a lot of intention that never meets reality when you look into some of the tests that we see with our retailers. I think two things for me that stand out. One is the part of social commerce and how much that is on the rise. And luckily you tested it through all Gen X's and G's and millennials. But I think there's a new element that I really look forward to seeing probably in the next report about AI commerce, right? And how that is going to really influence stuff, because I think that's completely changing the game. The second thing that I find super interesting is really about delivery convenience, because I think we talked a big deal about, do they want it as fast as possible or as cheap as possible? I think the element of trust and reliability is a whole new notion that we're seeing, and I think it comes to show in the data as well.
Alex, you probably have spent the most time now with the survey since you got it a few days before everybody else. What about you, man? Any insights?
Yeah, let me just quickly comment on I think what Sam said. I fully agree that this is a consumer survey, right? And they give preference. And you're right. Sometimes, as a consumer, you give your preference, but maybe later on you act differently. So I think that's absolutely a fair challenge. But it's particularly, for example, about the out of home topic. I think the trend is there, and there's still discussions somewhere in some markets. So will it come? It will not. And my personal view, it will come. So I think there's definitely some doing next to the intention of doing it. So just want to comment on that one. I think one of the things that I found interesting is around the cross-border piece, that this notion around 7 of 10 are buying only from countries they trust. I think that's something very interesting, because if we can overcome that and help to overcome that and explain and why it makes sense to do and basically build trust on that type of country label perspective, which is a new element to it, which I think is something we should think about.
Yeah, good thoughts, and we'll definitely come back to that. I think cross-border, one of the most important topics in this survey for us, and of course, an area that we continue to invest a lot in our business because we see a lot of opportunity in that cross-border market. Grows significantly faster than that domestic e-commerce market. So, super important place to focus. I think for me, a lot of continuation of I think earlier surveys and things that were kind of known to us. The social commerce piece, 7 out of 10. Making a purchase on social commerce, I mentioned earlier. I only don't resonate with that because I, maybe being older generation, haven't done it, so it's not so familiar to me. And I think the other one that was interesting for me was the 34% of consumers signing up for some kind of a subscription. And, Sam raised a good point, right? Is that just Amazon Prime driving that number, or are people really signing up, significantly for product level subscriptions? And I think that's an interesting development in the market as well.
Yeah, I think delivery subscription, they are very different things. There'll be some great businesses here building product subscription businesses, but it's hard to retain those customers. Like, wallet share is under huge amount of people trying to get the same wallet share. So trying to keep a customer for a long period of time. Think about the food delivery boxes, the Gustos and HelloFreshes. They never really keep a customer after 9 months, right? So you have to go on then a full try and how do we then get that customer back downstream, which is a real problem for them. I think the delivery subscriptions, the mistake that I think we see with some of the people we work with is they lump delivery as all the same thing. A delivery is very different from a return, and that's a very different economic model as well. So it's very difficult to price that as a retailer. How do you get that right? How do you get the price point right so you're not underwater on it, but you're driving the behaviors you want in terms of, I'm going to keep coming back there because I feel like that delivery is free because I'm already paying that subscription or that one-time fee. I think the challenge is you're driving a right behavior from a order perspective, but you're probably actually making it too easy on the return side, and then you give yourself a problem because you're increasing the proclivity of the return. So I think that's what we've seen. You see in the UK, a number of the big fast fashion houses roll back those returns propositions where they were free for a period as part of that subscription. So, our view is free is great. We would always believe you put free, you should bake that into your product pricing wherever possible, because we are sort of overly free is something that we'll always lean to more than anything else, right? It's something we should be trying. Consumers are always going to be a preference to do, but I don't think that should also go into the return section. So I think people need to be more cute with the way that they do delivery subscriptions. Is my view.
Yep. Yep, good insights. I think a good segue maybe to talk a little bit more about the optionality at checkout and the preference for consumers, right, between a free option, the willingness to pay if logistics is somehow a chargeable service, and how do you get that balance right? And Dana, I think you have great relationships with retailers and merchants, and obviously sit on a lot of data. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it also varies in the markets, right? A household brand like DHL obviously has a lot of positive attribution to it. So if you go on and show the actual brands to choose from when you pick a carrier, that might have, an automatic kind of effect of choosing the carrier that you trust the most, right? I think that's one element that we're seeing in some markets, specifically Germany for once. But then you have other markets, let's look at the Nordics, where it's really not about a preference for a carrier, but it's about the certainty of the date of delivery. And that's the big change that we're seeing where, there's a lot of complexity in checkout, and every retailer is trying to keep the checkout as lean as possible, right? Because you really want to avoid any abandonment or asking too many questions, because they might just go, I don't know which carrier, let's move on and shop somewhere else. But what we see as like the key trick to successful checkout conversion rate is tell the customer you have two options. This is the slower one, but it will be there on Friday next week, or you can have it tomorrow and it might cost you a little bit. And then let the customer decide on when they want to have the good, because that is exactly the biggest driver for checkout conversion that we have been seeing.
Can I ask you a question
Yeah.
there? The question is, how would you see would out of home fit into that mix? Because that's also a pretty decisive difference and decision that we are seeing with many of our customers, of course.
Yeah, and I think that's also why out of home is so on the rise, because at least it gives them a little bit more control to as and when they're going to collect their orders. People like us, we're at a conference in Amsterdam now. I probably don't care whether it's there on Thursday or Friday, but if I have a fast option, I certainly want it before Saturday, but I'm not sure when you're going to be at my doorstep. Today, I'm definitely not going to be there to collect it. I'm going to go out of home, right? Because I know that locker, best case, is there. If it's a Friday I'm shopping and you're saying you put it there on a Saturday night and then I can't collect it again, I might make a very different decision here. So I think it's really, and that's also something that retailers need to learn. We see a lot of rise in cross-border, but we really need to look at the very country-specific delivery preferences,
Absolutely.
the geographic areas that you're shipping in, and then you need to tailor it, which is why I'm a big fan of give a choice at checkout. Don't make it too complicated, but talk about the exact delivery date, because that's what people care most.
Yeah, good point. Thank you.
Yeah, I would confirm that, right? I mean, from the discussions that I have with our big retail customers, big marketplace customers, the discussion has definitely shifted from how do you shave hours off this to how do you deliver exactly the same time every time and make sure we deliver ultimately on our customer promise. I think that's really a big driver. Yeah, absolutely. Sam, any takes?
Yeah, I think, Alex, you said at the start about out of home, the data is actually the survey is probably under-indexing what we think we might see from an out of home. And I'm speaking from, this is what we do. So I appreciate I'm going to have a bias here. So I'll just make that, I'll set my position clear. Diana makes a great point about checkouts. Retailers are rightly very concerned about adding friction into any kind of part of the checkout experience. Doesn't matter what it is, payments, delivery, and so forth. But you have to have a minimal, we call it the minimal viable friction. You still have to introduce new options to people to make sure that they've got that. So if you're a retailer today and you only do home delivery, you are making that assertion that your customer is always going to be home at any period of time between that 3 and 5 days. And that's just patently untrue. That's not a fact. So you're either doing two things. Those customers who need out of home, and remember, pick up points a lot, because this is a need-based product, right? I'm a big supporter of out of home, of course I am, but we're not thinking it's going to take over home delivery. That's not the point. But the place is, it's there for a time when home delivery doesn't work for the shopper. So on that basis, being that product, if you only do home delivery today, you're saying, I know my shopper is always going to be there. That's not true. So you're either missing a conversion because that shopper needs the out of home, or they are going to miss that delivery because they're not going to be home. So you're either missing revenue or you're missing costs. So that's really mid-zero. But the problem is getting this option into checkout is very complicated. Checkouts are already filled with third-party apps, different configurations. Do you do subscriptions, different delivery options, one-click pay processes? So getting that piece right is really critical. Getting that enablement right for a retailer is really, really critical. Making sure that we can go to the world and say to a retailer, this is going to be neutral or enhance conversion, as well as giving that ultimate choice, is absolutely critical. And if you get those things right, then we will see a massive step change in out-of-home, which we're starting to see more and more so in Europe, but also from our perspective in the UK, which is behind Europe from an out-of-home perspective, we're really starting to see those usage rates increase.
And maybe just on that point, right, for everyone that is considering what to do there, look into your data, because you actually have quite a clear indication already. So if majority of your customers never at home at that time, it's going to end in some sort of a parcel shop situation anyway. If you use that opportunity to ask them whether they like that form of delivery, that gives you a very clear indication on where to develop your network.
And that really works from the consumer perspective. So, you can get on your app, do the in-flight redirect when you're not going to be home. But speaking for Ryan and Alex, what they want to do is drive it at point of purchase, because the margin improvement for you is most valuable. So from a carrier perspective, consolidating, knowing that as far up chain as possible is the maximum value. The in-flight, there's still value in that consolidation, but it's decreased because you might not be able to get it on the right lane, you might want to get it on, and all those kind of different things. So we think to maximize the value throughout the supply chain, we need to get as many people selecting that option. DHL can pass a bigger discount down to the retailer. The retailer can pass the discounts down to the consumer. And in those occasions when home delivery doesn't work or you can't define the day, out of home should be the catch-all for all those other situations. And it should be a big part of it.
Yeah, I think it's exactly what probably is like shared value, right? Because everybody benefits in this, right? The retailer has a consistent, pass-through and hopefully a good, cart push-through and purchase option, but also the consumer, and not only the carrier, also the consumer benefits, because it's there at the time when it's there. So the convenience is absolutely there. So it's really a win-win on all sides. Yeah.
So maybe just wrapping up a little bit on the delivery and the checkout piece. Maybe just a hot take. Do you, for your average orders that you're buying online, do you pay for delivery?
No.
Not if I have a choice.
Not if I have a choice.
Not if you have a choice.
Not if I have a choice.
It's interesting, right? I mean, we saw earlier that, not having the preferred delivery option, and I think the expectation of the consumer, and the survey reinforces it, is generally free. But we got some late entry statistics as well, I think, Alex, right? So looking at it instead of from the consumer side, looking at it from the merchant side, I think only 42% of merchants that we've polled actually offer free delivery and returns. And I think 25 offer some kind of a mix, maybe to your point, Dana, on paid, let's say, upgraded options and free standard sort of deferred options. So seems the market is starting to figure it out a little bit.
And also highly depends on the product categories that you're shipping, right? If Amazon is shipping it too, then you might better make it free to even have a chance there. I think also if we look ahead into the world of AI, where everything becomes even more transparent, the total cost of goods that you're ordering is going to be the key decision criteria, and your retailer and the customer is not going to kind of want to figure out, which part of this now is the delivery, or is there a possible return? So you've got to be as transparent as possible. To Sam's earlier point, find a way to bake it in. But free deliveries, in my perspective, in a highly competitive world that is just getting even harder for retailers to differentiate, just got to bite down that bullet.
And you just eliminate a decision. So if I know it's free, I don't need to think about what my options are downstream in a world where, again, the attack for wallet share is so vast. That people have I don't think there's a lot of sort of spare discretionary income lying around for people to just deploy against new things. So yeah, if you can embed it in, you take out the whole factor about, do I decide to pay or not pay for this? And we all know we've all added that extra thing at the checkout to activate free delivery. So it's it should be possible for the majority, as long as the margins support it. Of course, it doesn't work for everybody. I appreciate this. If you can put that 2-3 euros into the product pricing, you can also manage Google so that pricing doesn't sit on Google, so you don't look expensive on a product business. That's all manageable if you understand how to use those tools.
For now, until AI starts crawling your product page, because then it's not manageable anymore.
Yeah, and then all kinds of new problems. And and I wanted to make a point about the social shopping, because it only just struck me as we were talking about it. So us as a business, we specialize in integrating at checkout. That's what we do. Not a sales pitch, that's just the fact. What we're seeing now is all these new injection points that third parties are going to have to think about. We've got lots and lots of third parties here adding solutions to retailers to enhance, typically save cost, increase conversions. Those are the two critical things we're all thinking about. How are we going to do that when the shopping basket and checkout moves into these other paradigms and into these closed paradigms? How are we going to control the same kind of things we've been working on for years to streamline, iterate, develop, to improve the e-com experience? A lot of that is going to move into new platforms that we don't understand and we might not even have access to. So it's going to be a whole different world going forward. And for us, it's a real interesting challenge about how we kind of take what we've understood and take into new things. So I think that's going to be a real interesting challenge for you. They're going to have to upskill into whole new worlds, and probably when people have just started to feel like they've already cracked it, and it's going to be tough. And I wish them the luck.
So, good conversation. I'm enjoying it so far. Thank you. So maybe we'll jump over to cross-border for a little bit because, as I mentioned earlier, it's a pretty intense area of focus for us. It's a part of the market that we see growing faster than the domestic piece. But I think there's still merchants out there who don't prioritize this, for a variety of reasons, fear, complexity, etc. So maybe Alex, since you lead cross-border for us as a division, maybe you could talk a little bit about what the merchants are seeing and what barriers they're facing, and then maybe we can flip to the consumer side with the team here and talk a little bit about how we gain their trust.
Yeah. I think just in general, there's a difference between a big market entry where you advertise your page in another country and really invest millions in marketing spend and so on. I think that's maybe one thing to do it, but the other thing is you have your core market and at least allow others to shop on your page. Still a page now, maybe something else going forward, but to do that. And I think I think that I want to differentiate it a little bit. I think a big market entry with millions of spend, I think is something else and a bigger decision. But I think in terms of just opening up your core selling space for other markets, I think for me, it should be a no-brainer in many ways because there's all the tools available. I think what often, I want to give you two examples, maybe just to kick it off concretely. So but of course there's some things that sometimes can happen. For example, we have smaller customers from Southern Europe, and they're selling into Germany, and they are making a great deal of business in September, and in October they have some serious cash problems because they did not expect that the returns rate is 40% in Germany or something like this. So I think there are some serious business challenges here, and I think these are the things where we come into play, or we also play a role to consult and explain. To your point, Dana, so the consumer preferences are not exactly the same in each country, and that's why I'm a big fan of working in each country with what I call like close to consumer networks. Yeah, so they understand the consumer, they have the right capillarity, they have all the right mix of last mile, which is again not exactly the same. They maybe consider that delivery to a neighbor in some country is standard, and in other countries you never want that your neighbor knows what you're ordering. So there's these preferences that only honestly can be known in the country, in the destination, and I think these things we need to, and we are actually trying to bridge when we talk to our customers to overcome it.
Yep, fully agree. There's a saying here in the Netherlands, right, that the Dutch have nice neighbors. So it's a little bit more prominent, I think, here to leave with a neighbor than you might find in some other markets. Dana, what about like building, trust with your overseas consumers? How do you do that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of hidden challenges in cross-border that retailers are afraid of. And I think one of the things you just mentioned, right, is the cost of return. The other thing is the element of trust of when is the good going to arrive, right? And how do I plan around it? And especially when you have cross-border, you don't always have the luxury maybe to have a fully integrated DHL network with like end-to-end visibility. But if you go a little bit more scrappy, then you have huge visibility gaps, specifically at origin, at handover points, mind you, there might even be kind of customs process in the middle, and specific that step of the order where you paid cash, hard-earned dollars at a checkout, and then nothing happens until it hits your destination country. That is where huge hidden costs lie, especially on Wismo inquiries, right? Because then all of a sudden you get a lot of inbound calls of like confused consumers saying, I paid 5 days ago, it's still not here. First problem. Second problem, I haven't heard anything, so I'm assuming it's lost, so please cancel my order, and all the problems attached to it. So I think the one recommendation we give is like invest in visibility first, because that's a key kind of not just trust element for your consumers, but also hidden cost driver otherwise to your delivery, not even talking about the returns yet. So visibility on the product item, so you reduce the likelihood of a return, right? That's one. But then visibility on the delivery journey. And mind you, that means that if you have a destination country, let's take the Germany example, very nice, very complicated German language to describe what actually happened to a parcel, might be really hard to understand in Italy. So also invest in, and this is of course what we are doing, make sure that it's end-to-end, fully transparent transparent, localized in the local language, and intuitive enough for the customer to trust you with their hard-earned cash on the checkout as well.
Yeah, fantastic. I think one of the findings in the survey was that, the fear of fraud from a consumer perspective was still pretty prevalent. More than 50%, I think, said they had some level of fear. Sam, what do you think? Where's that coming from? How do we combat that?
I think there's a lot of new brands and new entrants into the market in recent years. And I think that's probably what's driven some of this data point here, because with the growth from Temu, Shein, brands that we don't know very much about, we're concerned probably a bit about the source and where that product comes from. And I think there's well-documented reasons for that concern. And I think then that probably then permeates into the wider thinking around why people are a bit more concerned about where's that product coming from, how's it getting to me, how on earth is that thing so cheap? How are they possibly doing this? We hear from customers all the time in the UK, particularly in the fashion world, saying you just cannot even produce. We didn't think they could even produce it at these kind of levels. So I think that speaks to that trust, that confidence, and then does that permeate again into a sort of a fraud challenge as well? Am I actually getting things from the right kind of places that I think I am? So, and maybe that's also part of the marketplace piece. Marketplaces are a very disparate group of different types of vendors and wholesalers and all kinds of things. So it's not all bad, definitely, but I'm not surprised that has had an increase in its, it's come out in the data as an increased concern for the consumer.
Right. So some new experiences, some changing trade patterns, new companies.
We just don't know them as well.
Just familiarity. Yeah. So probably my guess is we'll see less fear of fraud next year in the survey.
Yeah.
That would be my take on it. Yeah. I think, from my side, this is such an exciting space. And I think this, Alex, you were talking about it, this opportunity, not to necessarily do a huge market entry and go big on advertising and full localization, but actually just support some passive selling to those consumers who are already super hungry for your product sitting across Europe, which is generally a pretty easy problem to solve, brings huge benefit. So we want to help consumers with that for sure. Mm. Yeah. Okay, maybe talking out of home, Sam, one of the other priority topics we wanted to get to. I think it's wildfire in Europe. I think it's already the preeminent way to facilitate a return in a number of markets, and I think in some even the delivery. So talk to me about how to make it successful. Is it just a footprint that's needed, or what's the details?
Well, out of home's had a really interesting history in Europe. It's been around for a long time. It's been talked about for these conferences for a long time, but there's been some missing pieces that has made adoption by retailers very difficult and essentially just too expensive and too complex. So it's terrific. DHL have now built out this pretty formidable 160-ish thousand locations, going to keep growing, and other partners on stage have built some pretty big networks of locations themselves. But from a direct out-of-home perspective, there's park returns for a second, which is well discussed. I know we might come back to it, but just parking returns and the C2C, which is obviously had a huge boom on the back of people like Vinted, who've really driven that locker experience, which can be done incredibly cheaply and very effectively from a customer service perspective, because that delivery never fails. We should remember that there's never a Wizmo on a locker-to-locker, or there really shouldn't be. But there has been a broader enablement challenge. It comes back to the point that Dana made about getting into checkout is very difficult. So that is what we do. We enable people at checkout. You need thousands of configurations to do that in a way that's palatable for the consumer, but provides a great experience. But just let's assume that that's adoptable by everybody and everyone can just integrate, so we don't get too into those weeds. There are three critical things that one needs to think about for out of home if you're going to offer this option to your customers at checkout. One is you've got to get the incentives right. This is still new for some consumers, or they haven't used it very much. If you're going to open up a new coffee shop next to another one, you need to offer a free muffin to prove that your coffee's better, right? You've got to do something different. You've got to get those incentives right. There's been a sort of Noah's Ark theory of if you offer an out-of-home, the animals come. It doesn't work like that. The proposition needs to be much more intelligent. So one is you've got to get your verbiage, your language, your promotion, your incentives right. Two, then you've got to have density. Absolutely right. Some people want lockers, some people want stores, but fundamentally you need density. There's great data now that we can use to say stop putting lockers in bad locations, and I think DHL is really smart about where they put things and the rationale behind that, utilizing their own data. That's number two. But the third thing is you should think about this like a new we think about this like a new product. And if you come and visit us, you'll see the technology that we have that drives the behavior of the consumer to select that DPD, that DHL service point, for example. You've got to think about it like, how am I going to get this customer from A to B? It's not just provide a location, put in an address and do that. And there's all these kind of enrichments that we can do that drives that behavior, that then adds all that value down the service chain. So just to give you two very quick examples. So with the growth of lockers, it's all well and good Alex going, well, I know where my local Bon Marché is. I know where that is. But where's locker number 37B on the side of St. Helier Street? So you've got to have imagery of those locations, which doesn't come out of the box with any partner we work with. So we scan the internet every single night, the World Wide Web, for images of every single location. But then we do a second context image, which shows where it sits on the street, so not just the front on, so we can make people answer, oh, I understand where that location is. We've got to give that consumer as much confidence as possible to select a new thing. It's a new thing, or it's something they don't do all the time. So that's one way we're using a bit of additional technology, and we're seeing huge increases in usage of lockers as a consequence of giving that optical recognition. The other thing that's interesting is if anyone's used out of home before at a checkout, you're going to say, type in your zip code, postcode, address, and we'll show you the nearest locations. Everyone puts in their home address. Technically speaking, 50% of the time, that's not the right location for you because your home is here, your work is here, and what you're actually doing is typically picking up a package on a trip chain. So what a new piece of technology we're about to launch will tell you what the 3 best are on the route that you're selecting, not just by one geolocation search that you're doing. That's incredibly valuable in the A/B testing that we've been doing over the last 6 months because we're finding about 30% of customers go, there was a shop that I visit anyway that I didn't know because it wasn't in my original search parameter in my house. And we've seen massive attribution increases in the usage of out of home. So what I'd say to anyone thinking about this is don't just think, I just need to get out of home in my checkout. If you just put a list of a location or show the nearest to a search address, you're not going to get the kind of return on that capital and time invested. You have to do it properly. It's a hard thing to get right, but if you get it right, we're seeing in countries where typical usage rates might be 5 or 10%, we're starting to see 30 to 40% usage rates. In the UK, which if it was a 1 or 2% before, it's great. In France, we're starting to see 60%, 70% usage, and that's all from technical innovation, no change in network, no change in anything else. So I apologize for the slightly long, slightly sales answer, but I just want to give a bit of context of some things we're working on in terms of the out-of-home space.
No, I think it's great. I think it's a great level of detail for everybody here to really help them understand, what it takes to be successful and that it's far more than just putting a box in a high traffic location and assuming that everybody's going to just come and check it out. I don't know, Dana, any comments, any thoughts on out-of-home from what you're seeing?
Maybe just some experience because we do a lot of business in Asia as well, right? And I think where it gets really interesting, and you might not like to hear this, but it's a market where everyone defends their own lockers a little bit. But if you talk real customer convenience, then ultimately having open lockers at convenient places where you can have multiple deliveries in. So for avid shoppers like me, right, I might have actually 3 things sitting there. One locker was full, the other locker was a different carrier. So you're running around the city like a chicken, trying to get all the stuff in, and then you don't know the size of the boxes and other complexities as well. So just looking in different markets like Singapore, for example, where it's super exciting to see that they actually managed to aggregate locker system into one delivery location. I can have all my parcels in there, and they even have the smartness in China, for example, Hangzhou, Alibaba does a really good job there where they say, look, this is actually getting a little too big for you to carry. How about you schedule delivery from all the parcels in a locker and then get that home to you? So I think just want to encourage also the carriers out here that lockers are a good first step, but there's actually a couple of new additional steps that you can take to make it really truly convenient for the end consumer.
So you're saying they're they're almost reconsolidating the delivery and saying, hey, there's now 2 more. Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know they were doing that. That's amazing.
Go ahead.
All I can say, I think you said it before, it's more than the box, and it's still very dynamic. Even the box itself is still very dynamic. So I think there's more to come, and I think that's why it's great to have these exchanges to stay close to innovation and see how we can build it in going forward.
Yeah, and I think there's multiple components, and this has been the challenge. You have what do you do at checkout, who delivers that package, and as you say, it's pretty fragmented from a European perspective. But then how do we make those lockers smarter? Some great companies here. There's one I can see over there who I know will be doing a lot more innovation to make those lockers more intelligent about how they can handle package over time. So the good thing is there's a lot of capital coming into the space, a lot of private equity entering the space. That's going to be good for consumers. I'm not quite sure how that fits exactly with DHL and carriers perspectively, but there's just a lot of focus on the space, and that's probably going to be a really good thing from a consumer perspective.
Yeah, maybe wrapping up out of home so we can spend the last 5 minutes on returns. Yeah, you might be surprised, Anna, that Alex and I are more open than people might expect in terms of shared locker networks. I think that's really how you create value for the end consumer. And I think obviously that's a way to get the right capacity to the right place. So I think we are a partnership company, and I would expect it will continue to go down this path. Alex, hopefully I'm not saying anything wrong here.
There's also some investments already in open locker networks in Germany, as you know, so, and in others, and also our partnership with Poste Italiane and so on. So I think that's definitely coming, but I think, as I said, so I think there's more to come, and to your point, it all comes down to data. Because when you have the data, then you can make the decision or the offer to do something else with the shipment. So all these type of things, that's why this piece is super important.
Yeah, I made my last comment. I was in China last week, and I was outside of one of our clients' offices and looking at the lockers that were adjacent to the building, and they were being used both for parcel deliveries and for food deliveries. And I thought, oh, that's an excellent way to increase the utilization. So I don't know, more innovation opportunities there for us. Oh, okay, maybe talking a little bit about returns, right? Because returns is painful. We talk about how to make it less painful, but we don't always talk about fixing it at the source. Dana, what ingredients are needed to create like a great returns experience, and maybe just share your thoughts on the space in general?
Yeah, so I think if we think returns, we often think just about the consumer side, which is obviously really, really important, but returns are the biggest headaches for many retailers out there, right? So when we think about returns, is how can we integrate sort of a smooth return experience integrated into a website, best case branded as the retailer with, in an ultimate way, like a QR code. You don't need to print anything, really make it smooth, but add value into that return journey for the actual retailer and the warehouse that needs to deal with those returns, right? So if you don't have a return slip in a parcel, that's already a good start. That might sound counterintuitive, but first of all, it's environmentally friendly. And second of all, it gives you that first momentum that you get a pre-alert that a return might be coming, because people actually need to register a return. So I think that's the first step that we're seeing in the market that we're encouraging everyone to do. In order to do that, you then need to have a nice kind of sort of intuitive integrated returns portal. And I know you might talk about we should make returns maybe even a little bit harder, and I look forward to that discussion. But the other point there is use it as an opportunity to gather as much data as possible, because the more you know about a return and the reason for a return, the more you can prevent the next one from happening, right? And associating that to all the data. So what we, for example, see is being really granular on return reasons. You usually have a drop down on return reasons. Shake those little drop downs up. Don't make them in the same order all the time, because people just blindly click it. But really make it intuitive enough for you to learn from them is probably the holy grail of kind of avoiding returns in the long run. And then send pre-alerts to that warehouse, please, because we actually know there's a pre-alert for a return. We also know that the return was handed over to a carrier. So for the warehouse to plan when the return is going to arrive, it is actually possible, just that we often don't give them enough visibility that it's coming.
Yeah, maybe let me comment. I fully agree. I think there's two ways of reducing returns in a way, right? One is to increase the cost for return, which is what the discussion was maybe the last 2 years. And I'm not saying this is not necessarily depending on the country and the player, not a bad idea. But the other way is exactly as you said, to reduce the reason for the return right at the beginning by using the data, reduce that. And we've seen many of our customers where this really moved the needle on profitability a lot more without jeopardizing, the sales in the beginning by, increasing return costs and so on. But maybe Sam looks a little skeptical, so maybe I'm handing it.
I was going to ask a rude question. I'm going to ask the rude question. It'd be interesting to know how much DHL makes on returns. It's still you still charge for a return or handling a return. I'd be interested to know what the margin is, and I won't ask you to answer that question. That would be rude to give us some margin information. But I guess the thing that I find, I have a bugbear for returns. I think you know this, Alex, is we have all these great suppliers doing some great things to make that journey really smooth, but they're making better and better stretchers. The stretchers have a leather chair, they have a cup holder. What we need to do is start providing medicine and cut down the number of returns. The problem is that people solving it want more of it. So I'm not going to mention name, but suppliers in this room don't want less returns. They get paid on a per return basis, right? So I think this is, over the last few years, people have been saying, where does AI come into logistics? Well, this is about how do we stop people making bad buying decisions. We need to be better at analyzing the data that we have, which we receive constantly in the systems, and then helping the consumer stop making bad decisions. I gave the example earlier. I should have a retailer stop saying, Sam, stop buying the medium t-shirt. You got a bit fat, buy the large, right? Stop buying the wrong sizes. And we should have that. And this is where AI should start solving this. But the problem is we have a self-serving system where the current suppliers not necessarily DHL and the other couriers, but let's think about all those software partners that come in and do these pieces, Rebound, Zigzag, and all these types of people. They're a solution provider, but they're not actually solving a problem for you, the retailer. They're just trying to facilitate it. And the better they make it for your customers, the more they're going to return. Is that a good thing? You don't want more returns. You want less returns. It'd be interesting. I think someone should come to this kind of conference and go, no, I'm not going to make your returns cheaper. I'm just going to reduce them by 30%. And I don't see a company here doing that. And I think that's a miss. And I think it should come.
Just a question, Sam, maybe building on that in our last couple of minutes. The theory, I think, has always been that by having a kind of clear returns policy and process and maybe an easy facilitation, that it drives actual conversions and results in incremental sales. What's your take?
I think that's just standard 101. I'm not particularly impressed by someone who goes, it's a cheap, easy process. I don't think it's that difficult to print a label and give it to a shop and give some good choice. So I think that if that's your high bar, I think potentially you're going to struggle to solve that problem. I think that should be the low bar, smooth, easy returns process, so then people can go and invest in other things. So I'm not, there's some great providers out there doing great things, but it'd be great to be, and as Dana said, if you have better data, you can give better recommendations. There's a slide here about all the reasons why people returned. I think 6 of the 7 items were bad consumer behavior. Well, not bad, sorry, but incorrect consumer behavior. And if we can cut that all down by 10%, then that's a massive saving from everyone's P&L.
Yeah, maybe just, I think, ultimately from our perspective, our job is to help our customers to be successful. And if you, and on the other hand, I don't think that returns will go away because that's part of the business model. So I think that's why I'm personally not afraid of a reduction of it. It's more because probably only a reduction of 5% already does a huge impact on the profitability of a merchant. So and maybe and for us that's fine, right? Let's say. So I think in general, I think if there's smart ideas how to manage this, and I think Dana gave a good one. It's not saying the process itself should be smooth, but if there's a step in between to register, to answer some questions, I think that's already a good balance of things, right? So you not just return something on a free label or something.
And combine the data that you have, right? If you know why they returned it, maybe it arrived too late or, any other reasons, you can actually learn from it. And I am convinced that ultimately reduces the number of returns.
Agreed.
Okay, so we are officially out of time. I would like to thank my friends and co-panelists here, Dana, Sam, Alex. I think it was meant to be an interesting debate and discussion. I think we've achieved that. Hopefully there were a few learnings for you. I know we didn't take audience questions, but we're kind of hanging around. So if you're interested, you want to build on a topic, you can tell you've got opinions and data to back it all up. So please find us. And thank you very much for staying with us. It was great.